Welcome into Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange alongside Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. Click like on the video if you think Houston wins the West. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click that bell for notifications so you know as soon as new content drops. And if you prefer listening to your podcast, we're on all your favorite podcast apps like Apple and Spotify. If you're a Texans fan, the three of us are doing live reactions following every game this season for our Texans on Tap podcast. If you missed our breakdown of surprises and wild cards from the 53-man roster, you can find that over on our other YouTube channel, Sports Map Texans, or in audio form wherever you get your podcast. Gents, little peek behind the curtain here. I use the same note document for the rundown from week to week. So I just kind of highlight the previous week and just delete it and start typing over it. Last week in the leadoff spot was pitching. And I'll be damned if it's not the same thing in my notes this week. Team ERA for Houston the past 30 days is the best in baseball, 2.54, and fifth overall now for the entire season. It's been a dramatic turn of events given that they have basically an entire full rotation of starters still on the IL. We've talked at length about the gauntlet of teams that Houston has had to face over the past couple of weeks. Boston, Baltimore, Philly, KC. They go 8-6 over that period. And as of today's show, find themselves 6 games up in the West. They do it without Tucker still in the lineup and missing Bregman for a large chunk of those games. What has been the most impressive thing about how Houston has turned this pitching narrative on its head this season? And what's your playoff rotation if the playoffs started today?
Ooh, a lot to unpack, as they say. The metamorphosis of the rotation as individual components and then as a collective has been phenomenal, right? Ronel Blanco is only in the rotation starting the season because of injuries. He launches the season with a no-hitter and then is just sensational for the first 2.5 months of the season. Well, over the bulk of that period of time, Hunter Brown pitched as if he belonged in the minor leagues. Upon his recall, for the most part, Spencer Arrighetti pitched, for the most part, as he belonged in the minor leagues. Yusei Kikuchi was pitching for the Toronto Blue Jays. Justin Verlander wasn't pitching much at all, and when he did, he was Recently, he's not even which is his own can of worms that we'll get to. Then you have Framber Valdez, who had a brief lull where it was, here's soft between the ears Framber again, who for the last 2.5 months now, if not for Tariq Skubal, would be getting mentions in the Cy Young race in the American League. So taken individually, guys have had tales of 2 seasons, and then you combine it into one starting rotation, and it's just been remarkable. And obviously the well-documented statistics, the second lowest opposing batting average for a month in the history of Major League Baseball, what the Astros did in August, the entire sport batting 185 against the pitching staff. Side note, geek out moment, and only the Cleveland then Indians in 1968 had a lower opposition batting average. 1968 is the most feeble year of offense in the history of the game, right? It was immediately after 1968 that they lowered the mound to give hitters more of a chance. The entire American League in 1968 hit 230. The Indians that year, their ERA for the month, where they had the opposing batting average lower than the Astros, their ERA for the month was 142. The Astros were 251 in August. But it's just been an amazing turnaround, dovetailing with Seattle essentially collapsing from before the All-Star break forward. And, Yogi's most famous Yogiism is it ain't over until it's over. I just know that while the Astros are in Cincinnati, there's a rotund woman warming up her vocal cords in the Astros bullpen.
I like the sound of that. I mean, for me, Framber's the biggest piece because you asked the question, Brandon. I've heard a lot of people kicking this around. He's got to be your number one starter come the playoffs. He's pitching the best right now. He's got the pedigree. He's done it before. He's got the experience. So I know he can kind of scare you from time to time. But if you're the Astros, now there's a little wait and see, right? We'll see how Verlander pitches over the next couple of weeks as we lead into the postseason. But I think Fromber's got to be your number one. I think Hunter Brown's got to be in there as well. And it's tough with Arrighetti, right? It's a rookie. He's never had this experience before. Hunter Brown hasn't started a game, but he has pitched in the postseason, and he's been spectacular. Kikuchi, not a ton of experience there either. So if I'm leaning right now, I'm kind of Fromber. If Verlander's pitching decent enough to make the rotation, I think because of the respect he commands, they'll probably put him in the number 2 spot, Hunter Brown number 3. And then you're deciding, I think, between, Kikuchi and Arrighetti after that. So I'd probably go Fromber, JV, Hunter Brown, Arrighetti at this point is probably how I'd line up at least my top 4.
Varied factors to this. To amplify on Verlander, he's pitching for his supper. He has 4 starts left. Because the Astros are so loaded otherwise, Verlander does not belong on the playoff roster if he doesn't pick it up a lot. 4 starts is what he'll have. Verlander's own words, not even close in terms of his mechanics. Right, his last 2 starts, terrible. His last couple starts, going back to before he went on the injured list, terrible. Add it all up, an ERA in the mid-4s. They just have too many better guys than Justin Verlander. Touched upon it a little bit last week. No career achievement award when you're talking about the 2024 Astros and what's in their best interests in the postseason. Now, when did the playoffs start for the Astros? They've surged to where there's a shot, though it's unlikely they get one of the top 2 seeds and the bye beyond the best of 3 wildcard round. If you're in a best of 3, even less chance to futz around, and let's defer to Justin Verlander, surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. The hell with that. Your postseason could be over in 2 days. So at this point, clearly Fromber 1, equally clearly Hunter Brown 2. And then it's who are you playing? And this holds also if you get to the American League Division Series, where it's a best of 5 and no way do you need more than 4 starters. The Yankees this season have a losing record against left-handed starting pitchers. Yusei Kikuchi is pitching against the Yankees, especially at Yankee Stadium with their big left field. If you're in a best of 5 with the Yankees in a 2 versus 3 matchup in the second round, and a lot of this obviously is just perspective. But if you're facing Cleveland, the Guardians have obliterated left-handed starting pitching this season. Starting this week, 28-11 in games against left-handed starters. So the Astros will do their deep dives and play the matchup games, but strictly off quality. Obviously, Fromber 1, Hunter Brown 2, and then it's between Kikuchi and Arrighetti for the other 2 spots. Blanco pretty clearly is out of the mix, right? He's going to miss a couple of turns as the Astros go 5-man rotation with a couple of off days mixed in within 8 days' time. And Verlander is on the clock. And especially if the Astros are in a best of 3, if Verlander is not sensational over his last couple of starts of the regular season, I mean, kicking him to the curb might sound harsh, but kick away.
Especially when you look at just how brilliantly Spencer Arrighetti has pitched over the past month here and beyond. But you really are cutting your nose off to spite your face if you're going to stick Verlander in the rotation for legacy reasons, as opposed to who are your best pitchers at that moment. But like Josh said, we have to see what Verlander looks like as he ramps back up. Given his track record, there is a high likelihood that Verlander could be a very, very good option for you. And then the decision-making becomes that much more difficult. Those are good decisions to have if you're a team that's, looking to get back to that 8th straight ALCS. Now,
Verlander's next start should be this weekend against the Arizona Diamondbacks, who lead Major League Baseball in runs scored. So tick-tock on JV.
Indeed. Another one of these retreads on my rundown is the breakout season of Yainer Diaz. For August, he hit 304 with a 482 slug and an 815 OPS with 15 RBI. And that's down from his July numbers. So it just speaks to the sustained success that Yainer has had this season, given that he's had that success and protecting Yordan especially. And now that Tucker's return is looking imminent, we're going to talk about that a little bit more at length in part 2. But, given that all these things are happening, you've got, Yainer succeeding very well and protecting Yordan, and Tucker's looking to return here by the end of the week. Do you think maybe Joe Espada splits up Jordan and Tucker in the lineup and uses uh, uh, Yiner in the middle of Jordan and Tucker and splits up the lefties a la the way that Dusty used to?
I think that will be the initial thought, and then it's how quickly does Tucker ramp up, right? How does he look? 3 weeks is plenty of time, right? Pitchers need time to build up and find their rhythm, and a starting pitcher to lengthen out. Hitters hit. If they're healthy, they hit. Mookie Betts missed almost 2 months, came back and homered his first game back and had multi-hit games, 2 of his first 3 games back with the Dodgers. Altuve last season, after he got his hand busted at the World Baseball Classic, didn't start a season until mid-May, started as if he hadn't missed anything. So Tucker, in terms of performance, I'm not saying he'll go back to 979 OPS level right away, but I would think if his legs are under him, Kyle Tucker should be all right. And then what you have to work with the lineup, do you still want Jordan in the 2 spot, right? Where way back at the start of the season, the spot is thinking was, I want my 2 best hitters up the most. Altuve 1 and Jordan 2. Bregman's another variable in this, right? He surged for a while, then he cooled back off. Bregman for the season, his on-base percentage is .316. That is grossly inferior to Kyle Tucker. I just want my best guys up the most. Jordan destroys left-handed pitching. Tucker this season, not so much. But Altuve 1, Alvarez 2, Diaz 3, Tucker 4, Bregman 5. If they have everyone healthy and performing within what you'd consider their reasonable realm of ability level, that's how I'd be lining them up 1 through 5. And then you have guys like Pena and Singleton down where they belong in the lineup near the end of it.
Yeah, that's the thing, the X factor. What Bregman are you going to get? How healthy is he going to get? Like Charlie said, you want Jordan hitting second or third. There's still just a lot up in the air. We don't know what Tucker's going to look like. So, I'm kind of wait and see on what the batting order looks like. But, Charlie kind of hit on it. It'd be nice to have 1 through 5 really stout to where, you're not having to hit Pena 4th in the lineup regularly. That's going to make a big difference for this club. But Yiner's turned into that guy. You want him up at the plate with guys on base. It kind of reminds me of when Yuli was I remember there was like at a point where he was hitting almost 500, like with the bases loaded, some ridiculous kind of number. So you see some of those flashes in Yiner, and Yiner's got even more power. So you want him up there with opportunities to drive runs in. And, Bagwell brought something up on the broadcast the other day, and I've noticed it with Yiner. He likes to hit the ball the other way to right field when there's guys on base. He's not trying to hit it 500 feet and yank it down the left field line. When there's guys on base, he's just trying to slap it into the outfield and drive in a couple runs, which is something we've been harping on this club all year about. Is they get a little too pool happy, especially in Minute Maid Park. And in those big situations, they start swinging at balls in the dirt and just trying too hard. I like Yiner's approach. Just if I get a fastball I can kind of handle, just slap it to right center, drive in a couple runs, and let's take the lead here. So yeah, I want to see Yiner definitely down in that area, and we'll see with Bregman and Tucker, but it's just too early. We got 3 or 4 weeks here to figure it out, but Yiner has become that guy. There's no way around it.
It's Yiner Diaz standing between Jordan Alvarez and winning the Astros Triple Crown. Right, Jordan has moved out front in batting average. Obviously, home runs is his. Yiner has him in runs batted in part because Yiner Diaz has just been magnificent this season with runners in scoring position. After an awful start, Jordan has picked it up, but he's nowhere near the league leaders with runners in scoring position. Yiner's in the top 10 in all Major League Baseball.
Josh, we've talked about it before. It's when Mauricio Dubon was at his best this season, when he was slapping balls the other way, letting balls travel and going with them and sending them the other way. That's where a lot of pitchers are trying to pitch you because they're trying to prevent you from pulling. It's when Alex Bregman is at his best, he's using the opposite field. So Yiner being able to do it at this point in his career and understanding like what the job is. And granted, conversely, it's the other way too, right? Is when he's up there to drive a ball in, if he's got a guy on third, he's looking to drive the ball in the outfield so that he can drive a run home. It's that situational hitting, and he's doing it at such a young age and early on in his career that really, really makes you think you have something special with Yiner. And you're absolutely right. At this point, I mean, truth serum in me, I'm not sure if I wouldn't say Jordan still, but yeah, Yiner's definitely one of those two guys who, if you've got guys on base, that's who you want at the plate, because you feel like they're at least going to give Yiner something to hit, whereas Jordan, they're usually trying to pitch around him, and they're you're trying to hit their pitch, whereas Yiner, he's going to get some opportunities to hit, and it's beholden on to him to make the most of it. I want to. This probably seems it's a good time to talk about this. Dana Brown's moves so far this season. He advocated early for Ronel Blanco to be a starter. He signs Victor Caratini, who's been a big part of this lineup. He claims Caleb Ort off waivers. Ort now has a 1.15 ERA with a 1.61 batting average against. Trades for Kikuchi. We've talked about it. They've won every game that he started. He adds Ben Gamble, who's hitting 308 with an 822 OPS since he joined the club. I think that's just 12 games, so not like a big sample size. And probably just as important is addition by subtraction. Moved away from the Jose Abreu experiment. Optioned Montero back down to AAA, and then doubles down on that decision on Montero by calling up Forrest Whitley when the roster expands. So I just I think it's a good time to circle back around to this, like considering the results and how they've been able to navigate through all these injuries and climb to where now they have that 6-game lead in the West. Has Dana Brown adequately silenced critics, in your opinion? Or does this just start all over again in the offseason when he has to make all his decisions on outfield, third base, and starting pitching?
Well, it'll start over. That's the cycle. But he certainly silenced those who aren't lunatics in the Astros fan base. I will say that Gamble and Hayward were desperation signings. It finally got to where with Chas McCormick, just enough already. Anybody else. So they signed the available veteran left-handed hitters, but they've gotten meaningful contributions in moments out of each of them already. But you mentioned Ort. Right? The Orioles could use him back in their bullpen right now. I X'd it out the other night. Anyone want Bloss, Loperfido, and Wagner back for Yusei Kikuchi, who at this point essentially is the difference between the Astros probably having a 3-game lead as opposed to a 6-game lead, the difference between having a shot at running down the Guardians and getting that bye past the wild card round and not. There are obviously the long-term potential ramifications of that trade, but that was a masterstroke move by Brown, adding Kikuchi to the 2024 Astros. So, yeah, anyone that would say that Dana Brown's had a bad year as a general manager, I don't mean to be harsh, but anyone saying that's a blathering idiot. I guess that's harsh. Doesn't mean it's wrong.
No, I've been happy with Dana Brown for most of the year. He caught some criticism for not having all these pitchers at the beginning of the season when all the injuries were piling up. But I mean, look where they are now. They have the best pitching staff in baseball. So clearly, he cleared that hurdle there. The one thing I kind of second guessed, this happened the other day. There wasn't a lot of talk about it, but when there were some moves made, Brian King went down to the minor leagues for the Astros. And in my opinion, outside of Hader, he's your best left-handed pitcher out of that bullpen. But the problem is with Caleb Ferguson, he was out of options. So that's why they elected to go with King. So I'm surprised that he's still not with the club. I wonder if at some point he will rejoin the Astros. It's just at 2.05 ERA, pitched 23 games this year, a whip at 1 flat. And now you could point at Ferguson and be like, oh, he's so much worse. His ERA is 4.44. Well, that's not the whole story. If you look at since joining the Astros, his ERA is 2.70. But as somebody that watches all the games with the eye test, I have a lot more confidence in King than I do Ferguson. So I wonder if that's an adjustment we see going forward here. But no, Dana Brown, and having to navigate all the Bagwell stuff and Jim Crane and the behind the scenes and the Abreu disaster, Montero, Crane obviously wanting to hold on to guys that he paid a ton of money to. Dana's had a lot to deal with this year, and I think he's handled it with a lot of poise. I think he tries to tell us the truth. I listen to his interviews pretty much every week, and I know the Astros, a lot of disinformation about injuries, but you could tell Dana, he kind of tries to tell you without coming out and saying it. And then if we look right now, he projected a few weeks ago, he was hoping that Kyle Tucker would return to the club after Labor Day, maybe the first week of September. What are we hearing now? That he might play in this Red Series, that he could be available in the Diamondback Series. So sounds like Dana pretty much had that on the nose. So I give Dana a lot of credit, and I loved the hire when it happened. Remember, we didn't like a lot of the other options they were kicking around, Brad Ausmus and some other guys. So I like that Jim Crane went with experience. Dana Brown, great pedigree. So far, we like what he's done as far as the drafts. So we'll see. And that's going to really matter here pretty soon. If Bregman leaves, it's on you, Dana. How are you going to fill that third base spot? I think it might be Bryce Matthews, but I don't want to get ahead of myself here. But yeah, Dana Brown, I think he's done a brilliant job.
I'm going to surmise that Dana Brown was following marching orders, but he flat out spoke with forked tongue over the Tucker stuff. And it's disappointing. It's aggravating. It's insulting. It's condescending to fans and anyone else consuming outright baloney when uttered from any member of the organization. I mean, as recently as over the weekend, Dana Brown, well, no fracture there, and then forced to basically release a statement. And then Kyle Tucker says, oh, yeah, a while back we discovered there was a fracture there. So to me, just silly power control. At the very latest, July 30th, 5 o'clock, there was no reason to BS about this other than we can BS, but they win. So within Houston, in the end, generally speaking, that's all that matters if you're the fan base. But just the latest example where an injury is concerned, the Astros organizationally did not cover themselves with honor. But here they are heading into the playoffs, almost certainly for an 8th consecutive year. Can they make it 8 consecutive ALCSs? And that's what you line up for. In telling the full, as yet unfinished tale of the 2024 Astros, needs to be included location. The American League West is the only division they'd be in position to win right now. Quite happily, that's the division they're in.
Yeah, and I want to be sure, too, that I reiterate that, or iterate, as you would say, Charlie, that Brown can only make the moves. The guys still have to perform. And obviously, a lot of credit also goes to the Astros pitching coaches, because, Josh, you call it the Astros car wash. The Astros will acquire a guy, bring him in, and he will, in many cases, look better. He gets, again, Dana gets to look that much better because he can acquire a Kikuchi and trade, but because the coaching staff gives, you say, a new strategy on pitch usage, he looks that much better and looks like a brand new pitcher coming over from Toronto. So good on the organization. It's an organizational success. It's not just on Dana Brown, but Dana Brown has taken, as you said, a lot of bullets, whether fair or unfair, given the situation that he walked into. And I think right now Brown is really, really distinguishing himself as a very smart general manager, at least with the decisions we've made. We haven't covered all the decisions in this. Obviously, we're just doing the highlights. There were some misses, but that happens when you're bringing in like journeyman guys and veterans on teams. But for the most part, Brown's moves have been very positive. And I don't know that the dishonesty that we might see from Brown is his philosophy. It seems to be, it's an organizational philosophy, which we're going to talk about in part 2. That video drops on Wednesday. That's going to be it for this video.
Brandon, one quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the car wash thing that we talked about, maybe that helps out Justin Verlander here a little bit, right? If they're helping all these other guys that haven't been Hall of Famers turn in some of their best performances, as Verlander gets a little healthier, the mechanics get a little more fluid, he gets back in the rhythm of things, maybe down the stretch we'll see that Verlander that we wanted to see. But I've just been hearing a lot of narrative about, oh, Justin Verlander's god awful in the postseason, so you don't want him. Well, the eye test tells you right now it's not quite there. And I mean, look how wild he was. But also a little blooper went in over first base. If that ball gets caught, he gets out of that game 5 runs, 5 innings, 2 runs. It's not great, but it's not bad. So there's a little things there. But just, keep in mind, Verlander, he's pitched 226 playoff innings in his career with a 3.58 ERA. And he was much better last year than he has been in recent years in the playoffs. So just something to keep in mind. It's not just a simple narrative that, oh, Justin Verlander equals terrible playoff pitching.
It's ignorance. Justin Verlander's had a terrible World Series career. Finally got the win in Philadelphia in 22. But division series, league championship series, he's been stupendous over his career. So that's just dumb. But none of those 226 postseason innings were thrown when Justin Verlander was 41 years old. Yep. So that's the race against time to ramp up and be a guy worthy of being in the 2024 Houston Astros starting rotation. That he faces.
And on Verlander, you're right. He wasn't getting shelled against the Reds. It was just death by 1,000 cuts, the majority of those being self-imposed. He was walking a lot of guys, which just goes to that point of he's just not back yet to 100%. He's working his way back. He's talked about how this is kind of his spring training to ramp up to where he needs to be. But the Astros need as many arms as they can get right now in the rotation to be able to give some of these guys, breaks and be able to expand the roster out or the rotation out enough to cover these 18 game consecutive series that they have here. So it's it's just about need right now. And right now he's trying to work himself back up. We'll see. And that's what we've said at the top of this conversation was we need to see Justin Verlander and what he looks like a couple weeks from now before we make any hard decisions. Of course, the Astros Twitter, as they're known as, is going to overreact on from a game by game basis. But you'd much rather have a Verlander wild card in your hand than not. So you'll take it, and if he can regain the form of Verlander, you will take that absolutely every time.
40-year-old Justin Verlander in the playoffs last year, just quickly. Against the Twins, 6 innings, no runs, 6 Ks. Rangers, the first time, 6 2/3, 2 runs, 5 Ks. The final game against the Rangers last year, 5 2/3, 4 runs. Not as good. But just think about it like this. We know how historically great that Rangers offense was last year, and then they got to see Verlander twice in that series. Remember what happened when they got to see Christian Javier twice in that series? He couldn't get out of the first inning after a pretty good performance the first time around. So, recency bias. Verlander wasn't great in his last start against the Rangers in the playoffs last year, but overall, he was pretty good.
And no offense to JP France, but you're not going to have a JP France going into a pivotal, decisive game in a postseason appearance. So there is that. We'll leave it there. That's it for part 1 of Stone Cold Stros. Like I said, we'll be discussing the implications of the Tucker Health update and the domino effect in our video dropping Wednesday. So keep an eye out for that. And until then, go Stros.